Welcome, you delightful human beings, to the second video dedicated to Act 1, Scene 7 of Macbeth. In the previous video, we focused very heavily on Macbeth's soliloquy. We considered how Macbeth was doubtful, how he was pensive, how he was thoughtful, and how he was considering whether or not to kill the king. And, through logical argument, he came to the conclusion that he will proceed no further in this business. That was a very authoritarian statement, a very commanding statement, telling his wife, no, I will not kill the king. What we will focus on today is how Lady Macbeth responds to that statement, how she is able to unpick his argument, how she is able to say exactly the right thing at exactly the right time in exactly the right way in order to manipulate Macbeth into doing something he's very clearly stated that he will not do. What we will focus on is Lady Macbeth's manipulation, Lady Macbeth's ability to pinpoint Macbeth's weaknesses and use those against him in order to get her own way. Therefore, at the end of this session, we should be able to answer this question. How does Lady Macbeth change Macbeth's mind? How does she do that? What language does she use? Which techniques does she employ? What does she say in order to change that very firm no into the word yes? What I'm looking for today is for all of you to understand what happens in Act 1, Scene 7, to understand its importance and its place in this play. I need you to understand the dialogue, understand what these two characters say to each other, and, most importantly, to consider how Lady Macbeth manipulates Macbeth using language. How is she able to change his mind? We left it last time on this line. We will proceed no further in this business. We talked about how clear and how commanding his voice is there, how he is making it absolutely clear to his wife, who is supposed to be subservient to him as the man of the house, that he will not kill the king. There is no wavering in his voice. He seems to be absolutely sure of his decision. He says, we will proceed no further in this business. There's no ambiguity there at all. However, he does then explain why. And you might argue that he shouldn't have to explain himself, but he does give his reasoning for why he will proceed no further. He says, he hath honoured me of late. This here means that Duncan has been very good to him. Duncan has given him promotions. He's now Thane of Cawdor, and that's because Duncan decided to make him the Thane of Cawdor. He has gained lots of admiration and lots of respect. He's gained in terms of monetary value too. So he has no reason to kill the king. He has no reason to hate him. He has no reason to ask for more because he's already been given more. So he hath honoured me of late. He's realised that actually he's in a good position here because the king seems to show him honour. And I have bought golden opinions. He's realised that his actions, his good actions, his morally strong actions, have allowed him to prosper under King Duncan. And the golden opinions he talks about are from all sorts of people. And this metaphor, these golden opinions that are bestowed upon him, that's his reputation. And his reputation, if you consider the connotations of golden, his reputation is precious. His reputation is valuable. And his precious opinions seem to place him in a very well-respected position. And he's gained all of that in a very morally good way. He's gained materially. And with all of that gain comes admiration from other people. And when he says all sorts of people, that's everyone. Everybody respects him. And what he suggests then is which would be worn now in their newest gloss, not cast aside so soon. We have this metaphor of clothing, almost like his reputation is an item of clothing, a garment that he can now wear. And from that clothing, it looks beautiful. Everybody respects him for wearing this beautiful cloak. And he should benefit from those actions, those good actions, and he should be basking in his glory, and everybody should be respecting him. What he's worried about is he should be enjoying the feeling of success, not plotting more success. He doesn't want to risk tarnishing his reputation, these clothes that he's adorned himself with, and he is very worried that he is going to cast this aside so soon. He's fearing that if he throws that reputation away to get more, that he may never gain at all. He doesn't want to lose what he's already achieved. So this is a man with a clear reason why he should not kill the king. Instead of simply accepting Macbeth's decision, Lady Macbeth uses a series of rhetorical questions to manipulate Macbeth and to question whether or not he is the heroic soldier that he suggests that he is. She starts off by saying, "Was the hope drunk wherein you dressed yourself?" That question itself is derogatory. It's a very disrespectful thing to say. She's saying, "Were you drunk when you put those clothes on?" She's mocking him. She doesn't see this heroic soldier in front of her. She doesn't see this person who was strong enough to go out into battle against MacDonald and Svino. She doesn't think that the man who's saying no to her is the type of man that other people see. And when she says, "Was the hope drunk wherein you dressed yourself?" she then continues that metaphor that Macbeth used previously. So that metaphor becomes extended, and we call an extended metaphor a conceit. And what she's doing is she's using that exact same image against him. She's manipulating that image because she's saying, "You must have been drunk when you put those robes on, because the man under those robes is not the big, strong, brave warrior that everybody else sees." She's insulting the image that he presented in the previous part. And she used another rhetorical question. She says, "Have it slept since?" She's saying, "Have you slept since you defeated those people on the battlefield? Because you're a different person now." He seems to have lost the conviction that won him respect, and she wants him to be the person who wrote the letter, the person who said, "There is a way that we can kill the king." She doesn't like the fact that Macbeth seems to have changed in his character, and she's insulting him for that. The next line says, "And wakes it now to look so green and pale at what it did so freely." She's suggesting that the person standing in front of her now doesn't seem big and strong with golden opinions. She changes the colour golden to green and pale, and that's imagery of disease. She sees his refusal to kill as a weakness, and in Lady Macbeth's viewpoint, weaknesses are supposed to be taken away. We're supposed to get rid of our weaknesses, cast them aside. She wants that disease to be excised, like you'd excise gangrenous tissue, or you'd excise a tumour. She doesn't like the weakness that she perceives in her husband. Lots of people would consider Macbeth's decision to refuse to kill the king as honourable and strong. Lady Macbeth sees that honour as disease, as that honesty as disease. Because in the previous part we saw what he did so freely. She's insulting this man because he's not the man that she thought he was. Previously, he was able to go out and kill easily. On the battlefield, he can kill anyone. He doubly redoubled strokes upon the foe. He unseened him from the nave to the chaps and fixed his head upon our battlements. Now she sees somebody who says no to killing, and she considers that a weakness. And then what she does is she uses her marriage against Macbeth. She says, "From this time, such I account thy love." Okay, if you're the type of person that says, "I'm going to kill the king," and then you take it back and you say, "Oh, actually I won't," then that's how I'm going to judge your marriage to me. You told me that you loved me, perhaps you don't love me. That's a very toxic thing to do, and it's suggesting that Macbeth is a fickle character. And Macbeth won't like this, because Macbeth's reputation has come from being able to execute, from being able to do things. What Lady Macbeth is doing is suggesting that Macbeth is not strong enough to do what he wanted to do. And then the last little part of what's on screen, she says, "Art thou afeard to be the same in thine own act and valour as thou art in desire?" She uses the word afeard. She's insulting his masculinity, his bravery. And if there's one thing that it seems to be important to Macbeth, it is his reputation as a strong and noble and brave warrior. So what she is doing is she's highlighting Macbeth's fatal flaw. He is the type of person that will not allow his reputation to be tarnished. And therefore, he's easily manipulated to do things by suggesting that he's not strong enough to do it. So she's using his pride against him. We can often consider Macbeth's refusal to be seen as unmanly as his hamartia. Hamartia is the fatal flaw that we see in characters. We could argue that Duncan's hamartia is his trust. We could argue that Macbeth's hamartia is his refusal to be seen as unmanly. To be the same in thine own act and valour as thou art in desire. And this is the rhetorical question that Lady Macbeth uses here. She's suggesting, are you the type of person that is scared to want something and do something about it? Act and valour, having the bravery to do something. Desire, what you want to do. What she is doing is she is taunting him. She's essentially saying, are you too scared to do what you actually want to do? Are you going to let other people tell you what to do? Or are you the type of person that will grasp an opportunity with two hands? What Lady Macbeth does in this part is insults his masculinity and almost shows her disappointment in her husband. This is not the end of her little speech. There's a little bit more that comes next. But in this part, you can see the rhetorical questions being used. She identifies his weakness. She manipulates his language. She uses the metaphor. She changes it. She uses the colour, but she changes it. Her speech also continues. She then says, wouldst thou have that which thou esteemest the ornament of life, and live a coward in thine own esteem, letting I dare not wait upon I would, like the poor cat in the adage? She begins by saying, wouldst thou have that which thou esteemest the ornament of life? And here she's asking the question, is that really what you want? This thing you think is so brilliant, this ornament of your life, is that really what you want? Here she's using sarcasm. She's suggesting that Macbeth doesn't really just want to be respected by people. He actually wants something better. He's already revealed that he would like to be king. But what Lady Macbeth is doing is insulting his aspiration to be good. She's questioning whether or not he would be happy to just cling on to being morally good and a respected person, because she doesn't believe that that is particularly impressive. She knows that if he chooses a life of just being a good servant or a good subject, that he will live a coward in thine own esteem. By his own definition, he would have to continue his life knowing that he didn't take action. And what she's doing is she is tempting him to take what he wants. She's using deliberately incendiary language because she knows that that's not good enough for him. He is the type of person that should be top of the tree. And instead, he's chosen to accept a position below that. What Lady Macbeth is doing is challenging him to not be a coward. She's deliberately using the word coward because that's the one thing Macbeth would refuse to be. His whole personality seems to be centred on this idea of him being a big and strong and masculine person. She's using a coward to goad him into changing that. And she says, if you don't accept this challenge, you're going to have to live your life as a coward. And she says, and live a coward in thine own esteem. By your very definition, you're going to be a coward. You're going to have to live with that. You're going to have to live with the fact that you didn't take action, knowing that you could have been more. And then she actually mocks him. She pretends to put on his voice, letting I dare not wait upon I would. She's deliberately making his voice sound weak, meek, the type of person who cannot seize what they desire. So she's mocking him. She's being incredibly disrespectful here. And then she uses the analogy of like the poor cat in the adage. What she's doing here is she's insulting him, being very disrespectful, suggesting that he is like a cat in a well-known story at the time. The well-known story is that there was a cat who was desperate to catch a fish. And this cat was sitting on the side of this water, and he can see the fish close to the surface, quite easy to take. However, the cat doesn't seize the object of its desire. The cat doesn't just pluck the fish from the water and feast upon it. The cat chooses not to, because the cat is too scared to get his paws wet. And what she's doing is she's suggesting that Macbeth is like that cat. Someone who does have a desire, does have an ambition, but doesn't really have the moral conviction to actually do it. She knows that Macbeth wants to take the crown, but she's suggesting that he's too much like this cat, using that simile. And if you think of the connotations of a cat, we might suggest they're too domestic. We might suggest they're too soft and kind and nice. Perhaps not strong enough to truly seize the objects of their desire. So what Lady Macbeth does is realises that Macbeth's whole identity is based on being a masculine soldier, and she counteracts that point with calling him a coward. Macbeth responds to this insulting term and says, "Prithee, peace." He tells his wife to be quiet. He tells her to stop speaking. The problem is, this is not the last time Lady Macbeth speaks. In a traditional relationship, in a Jacobean society, when the man says to do something, it was expected that the woman were to comply. The woman's role was to be subservient. However, she doesn't comply. Once Macbeth says these few lines, Lady Macbeth comes back and attacks once more. So Macbeth doesn't have the authority over his wife that he might have on the battlefield. He then says, "I dare do all that may become a man. Who dares do more is none." What he's suggesting is that he will do anything that anybody else can do. He is no weaker than anybody else. And he's standing up for himself here. He's standing up for his masculinity. He's just been called, someone who's less than a man. What he's doing is standing up and saying, "No, I am a man. I dare do all that may become a man." And if you think of the connotations of man, we have connotations of strength and power and decisiveness. What Macbeth is doing is saying, look, I am being decisive. I'm choosing not to do the thing. Lady Macbeth believes he's being undecisive because he's made the wrong decision. However, men are not just powerful, decisive and strong creatures. There is also connections of moral goodness, of loyalty and duty. Someone who attacks the king is not a man. That is a traitor. That is a beast, somebody who doesn't respect the laws of mankind. And when he says, "Who dares do more is none," he considers anybody else who were to kill the king would be a traitor. And it shows how committing this act will actually make him less of a man. It'll make him lose respect, not allow him to become more of a man. He believes that his actions on the battlefield have already proven how much of a man he is, and that he doesn't need to take the next step, a traitorous step, in order to gain more respect. He already has the respect that any man could wish to have. Lady Macbeth's response to this point is, "What beast was it, then, that made you break this enterprise to me? When you durst do it, then you were a man. And to be more than what you were, you would be so much more the man." She uses the word beast at the start of this statement. What beast was it? Beasts are inhuman. Beasts aren't men. It suggests that his actions are not one of a brave human being at all, but one of a horrible animal. His refusal to kill the king, which would normally be seen as a moral act, you shouldn't kill the king, she believes that his promise to her has been broken, and that men don't break promises. And she says, "Then that made you break this enterprise to me. Only weak things break." She's stating that he is breaking his promise, and that respectable people don't break their promises. She's just saying, okay, you might not be killing the king, but you're breaking a promise to me, and that doesn't make you a man at all. And she finishes that statement, a rhetorical question, with the word me. And I think here what I would suggest is that she is placing her relationship with Macbeth above Macbeth's relationship with the king. She believes that he should show more loyalty to her as his wife than he is showing to the king. So he has a duty to kill the king, to honour his wife. What she's doing is constantly subverting the argument that Macbeth had previously done. She then says, when you just do it, then you were a man. So she believes people who take actions are people to be respected. She's giving Macbeth the opportunity to regain her adoration. And she uses the word man against Macbeth. Remember, Macbeth is the person who's used the term man. She again takes the word and manipulates it, saying if you want to prove how much of a man you are, then you need to do it. It's the only way you can prove yourself. And then she finishes with, and to be more than what you were, you would be so much more the man. And what she's saying here is that when you decide to make this decision, and when you decide to kill the king, you will have more than you've ever had, but you'll also have more of my respect. So the only way that he can strengthen his masculinity in the eyes of Lady Macbeth is to commit that action. And then he will be more attractive, and then he will have a greater reputation than ever. What she is doing is she's using her position as his wife against him. She's being manipulative, and if you listen to the alliteration that's used, be so much more the man, there's almost a sense of awe and adoration. If you want to impress me, you need to kill the king. It's the only way I will accept you as the man you believe that you are. She then continues, and on the next slide I'll show you the next part of her speech. Lady Macbeth then points out his hypocrisy. She says, nor time nor place did then adhere, and yet you would make both. They have made themselves, and that their fitness now does unmake you. What she suggests here is that when you first told me about this plan of yours, well, it wasn't the right time, and it wasn't the right place. You didn't have the opportunity then. So when you said, oh, I think I'm going to kill the king, it wasn't the right time. And yet, at that time, you would have done it. You were ready to strike. When you first said that we're going to kill the king, you were ready to go. You had the strength of conviction, you seemed big and brave and ambitious, and yet they have made themselves, and that their fitness now, she's saying, well, right now, when everything is fit, when everything is ready, the opportunity is almost too good to be true. This man we need to kill is walking through our doors. He trusts us completely. He's going to get plenty of food, plenty of drink. He's going to drink himself into a stupor. And you now have lost the power and the strength of conviction. And she says that their fitness now does unmake you. She sees that Macbeth wanted to commit it when the time was wrong, but now the time is perfect, he no longer has the strength of conviction. Again, attacking his resolve, his ability to make a decision and to carry it out. And this leads us on to the final thing that she says in this small little speech of hers. In this next part, she uses some particularly grotesque and aggressive and violent imagery. She paints a picture of herself with a young-born child. So, I have given suck, and know how tender it is to love the babe that milks me. So she reminds Macbeth that they at one point had a child, and she knows what it's like to sustain that child by breastfeeding him. And if we think of the imagery associated with breastfeeding, we might think of a very tender image, a very maternal one, and a very intimate image. You can't get closer than a small child pressed up against the chest of a mother, and that mother is providing part of her body, producing milk for that child to sustain them, to give them life, to make sure that they're healthy. And what she says with this baby, she knows what it's like to have a child. I have given suck, and know how tender it is to love the babe that milks me. I know what it's like to feel, as a mother, how much love I had for that baby. And that is probably the strongest of human bonds, a mother looking after a child. And it's human nature to protect the vulnerable and the dependent. If you see a child, it is part of your responsibility to make sure that the child is kept safe. And that I'm sure any mother would agree with. And she knows how tender it is to love the babe that milks me. She loved this child that she was providing milk for. And what we have is that intimate imagery of a young child needing its mother to protect him. And the mother sustains life. If the mother were to reject the child would die. And she knows what it's like to feel that maternal instinct to provide and to protect for a child. And then she subverts this image. So she's painted this picture of a child who cannot look after itself, a beautiful child that needs its mother for help, and then she changes her language from that soft and tender imagery to, I would, while it was smiling in my face, she says that I would do something. And here we've got absolute conviction. She doesn't say I might or I may or I could. She is absolutely definite, completely sure in her conviction. This is what she says she would do. She would, while it was smiling in my face, again, think about the vulnerable image that's being created, a very delicate child. It has nothing but love for its mother, very tender imagery. And she says that this is what she would do. I would, while it was smiling in my face, have plucked my nipple from his boneless gums and dashed the brains out, had I so sworn, as you have done to this. It's incredibly powerful, incredibly visceral imagery being used. She says she would have plucked her nipple from his gums. Think about how quick plucked is. Completely immediate. No hesitation at all. She wouldn't even think about it. She would just do it without any thought at all. A very violent verb here, just like the word dashed in the next line, which again is equally immediate and equally damaging and destructive. Have plucked my nipple, so to remove all sustenance entirely, and to remove affection as well. To take that one thing that that child needs, she would remove it entirely. From his boneless gums, and again, boneless links with the idea of the babe, the tender, the smiling face, again shows it's vulnerable. This baby cannot provide for himself. It's entirely helpless. She would remove any affection from this child and she would dash the brains out. Incredibly violent and visceral language. It's very unnatural to think that a mother would be able to act with such violence towards their own child. And again, with no thought or hesitation at all, would absolutely obliterate this child's head. An incredibly disturbing and powerful image. So why is she saying that she knows what it's like to be a mother and this is what she'd do? Well, the final line is to tell Macbeth that I would be powerful enough to do this, you clearly are not. So she says, had I so sworn as you have done to this? This is the level that she would be able to go to in order to demonstrate her commitment to keeping promises and honouring her husband. Her husband says, no, I won't kill the king. She says, I'd be able to do worse than kill the king. I would be able to kill my own child if I made that promise. What she's doing is she is tempting Macbeth to actually honour the promise that he made by showing that she would go a step further. Again, Macbeth is a man, a masculine person, someone who is stronger than everybody else. What she is doing is she's presenting herself as stronger, hoping that Macbeth will take the bait and prove her wrong. Now that we've looked at this part of Act 1, Scene 7, I think it's appropriate to bring you back to the question at hand, which is examine how Shakespeare presents the strengths and weaknesses of Lady Macbeth. What we've just read about her having the power to look a newborn child in the face and to absolutely obliterate it would show incredible strength of conviction. It would show a woman who is able to conquer her emotions entirely. No normal human being would be able to do that type of act, and yet she believes she has the power to do so. She thinks that she can become emotionless. She called upon the spirits in Act 1, Scene 5 to remove all of her emotion and remove all of her feminine tendencies, remove that maternal part of her body that wants to protect the vulnerable. So whether or not these are strengths is something for you to think about. She's able to manipulate her husband using her language and using his language against him. She uses a range of techniques all the way through Act 1, Scene 7. What I'd like you to consider is how all of this acts to present her strengths. In the next video that I show you, we'll finish off Act 1, Scene 7. There's a little bit more to finish off with. But I'm hoping you've enjoyed this session, and I'm hoping it gives you something to think about when it comes to answering this question. Thank you very much, folks.